Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to episode 167 of the podcast. Thanks for joining me, and thank you for being a valued listener to the Nora Speaks podcast. If this is your first time listening, I would encourage you to subscribe on whatever app that you're using to listen to this podcast and share it with your family, share it with your friends, let others know. If you find value here, let them know that they too will find value in the Nora Speaks podcast. This is a podcast that is for us, by us. You know, at some point, we have to listen to messages and listen to content that feeds our minds and not just entertains us. And I know that, in a time like this where things are so difficult in the world, in our homes, in our communities. Things are challenging. We sometimes want to tune out. We want to unplug and we just want to wind down. But sometimes we have to feed our minds with information that's going to make us think, information that's going to challenge us with some thought that we may not have heard before, because we have to figure out how to be successful in this day. We have to figure out how to survive in this day. We have to figure out how we can save our children and save our communities from the awful challenges that await them and us when we walk outside of our homes, from the challenges that are inside of our homes, from the challenges that are inside of our own minds. So I pray that you are thoughtful as you listen to this podcast and listen to this episode. And I hope that you are thoughtful in other material that you consume. Because as I said, in a day, in a time like we face right now, we cannot be lazy. We cannot be passive. We cannot be complacent. So as I was preparing this episode, I was initially just going to have a conversation with you about what I am seeing on the news. I watch quite a bit of news, and what I'm seeing and what you're probably seeing as well is one political party demonizing another political party. What one set of ideologists are doing, they're demonizing those who think differently from them. And I know that no one is all good, no one is all bad. When I say no one is all good, I'm excluding those who are divine. But outside of the divine, there is no good or no one who's all good, and there's no one who's all bad. But if we listen to what they are purporting to us in the news, whether it's written in print or whether it's on video, they're trying to shape our minds so that we just select one side over the other. But I would encourage you to look into it all. And so I said I was, thinking about having that kind of conversation, but I realized I kind of have to back up and kind of broaden this conversation to one that talks about propaganda, because that's essentially what they're doing. They are promoting propaganda. Now, let's get into definition. What is propaganda? We know that propaganda is the dispersion of information, lies, and rumors with the idea to influence public opinion. And much of the time, propaganda is systematic. There's methodological efforts that are being made to guide the person's thinking, their beliefs, the attitudes of people and populations. Think about marketing, right? Think about advertisement. In a way, that's propaganda, because the product developer, the person who designed whatever it is that's being advertised, they have to now, after creating the product, they have to find someone, some advertising firm, some marketing agency to influence people to want their product. They need to influence people to get them to believe that they need their product. Well, the same thing happens when we're talking about politics, when we're talking about social reforms and social issues. It's a lot of propaganda. Propaganda is deliberate, it's targeted, and propaganda is intentional. Now, let me pause here by saying not all propaganda is negative. Not all propaganda is negative. The idea that somebody's going to use a system or a means to influence thinking, it is not always used for negativity. However, what we are watching and listening to, I encourage you, the listener, to be very careful, to be measured, and again, to be very, very thoughtful with the information that we're intake. So, I said that propaganda is deliberate and it's intentional. What is it used for? Propaganda is used to manipulate. It is used to guide the thinking, the emotions, and ultimately the actions of people. Propaganda is not necessarily used on a large scale because the propagandist wants to make people smarter. What they want is us to become committed to their ideas and to the ideology. And they use emotion as a means to guide our behavior. Propaganda is not used to make us smarter people. It is not made to necessarily make us think. They want us to act in a way that becomes almost triggered because of an emotional response that we have. Propaganda is spread through education, whether that's your textbooks in school or the educators that are standing in front of us. It's spread through videos, through the news, through images like billboards and posters. Propaganda is spread in music. It's definitely on social media and conveyed through those pundits that we find on the news and also TV talk shows. These people who are committed to ideas and want the rest of us to believe the same, then it's like someone calls a play, on a sports level, and everybody's running the same play. So you can put on television and you'll hear on your local news, you'll hear them kind of using the same script on different channels, right? Even when it comes to the national news, you go on some of these national news or international news networks. It's like everybody is reading from the same script. So I caution you, and right now there's a lot of intensity, especially as it pertains to the COVID vaccine, the masking and the anti-masking and the vaccinations and then the anti-vaxxers. Everybody has an agenda here. And so you have to understand, what is your agenda? What is it that you want? So that when you're meeting up with this kind of influence from one side or another, then you're kind of firmly rooted in what your goals are, so that you can kind of weigh through the information that's being brought before you. Now, as I started this conversation, I said that initially I wanted to just, people are talking about, Democrats are talking about the Republicans and how awful they are and the Republicans are talking about the Democrats and how awful they are, and the people who support vaccines are talking about how awful the non-vaccinated are. And then the non-vaccinated or the anti-vaxxers or the anti-maskers are saying that those who are pushing the vaccine and pushing the mask, well, they're these evil people that want to take liberties from people, right? So is everybody just all bad? I would suggest no, they're not all bad and they're not all good, and that there is truth in what folks are saying. But if we're not properly weighing what's being brought before us, then we can be victims of propaganda and we can be moved like sheep. So just because someone is saying it, somebody is making a suggestion to you, they use people that we like. They use media personalities that we hold dear. I watch how they use black ministers or black entertainers to push the vaccine to black people. And, for people who are in the Latinx community, they use folks who have that background to push, the influence of the vaccine to those people. And I'm talking about the vaccine because that's probably the biggest issue right now. But there are other issues. If you wade through media and marketing, you see that, that's the goal, right? To get a quote influencer. They get somebody that folks listen to, watch, and possibly look up to, and they get them to become their spokesperson, so that those who are receiving the messages are more likely than not to follow the messaging of that influencer. So how do we guard ourselves or be careful with propaganda? This is what I suggest. One, study the author, the speaker, or the messenger, whoever is bringing us the message. Study them. Identify what is their objective, what is their purpose here, and what they're saying to you, what they're pushing to you. What is their history as it pertains to you, as it relates to you, and as it relates to the condition of your people, of your community, and of your family. Always study the person who's bringing you the message, and think about and consider their relation to your history, to your people's history, and to your current condition, because it matters. Folks are saying that black people who are questioning the vaccine because of history regarding the Tuskegee experiment, where black men were had syphilis and they thought they were getting treatment, and in fact they weren't, because the federal government was studying syphilis and its course in people, and they used these men and their families as human guinea pigs. So folks are saying, well, look, that was the past. Right now we have this deadly virus and we have this vaccine, and we encourage you to take it because we're trying to, right wrongs of the past. And so some are saying, logically so in my opinion, well, yes, Tuskegee experiment, that was many, many years ago. And, we're in 2021 now. What does that have to do with the COVID-19 vaccination? And so some folks are saying, well, listen, we know that more black men are dying from treatable diseases. More black women are dying from treatable diseases than any other group of people. If you care so much, why did it take, or why does it take, the COVID or the coronavirus for you to now stand up and care? What about diabetes? What about heart disease? What about the food deserts that they say exist in the urban, primarily black communities? What about education? What about the crime? What about, the general public health and public safety within black communities? If you cared so much, then you would have cared about that, and we would have seen you campaigning as strongly about those issues as you're campaigning about COVID-19 and the coronavirus vaccine. So I hear that. And so that's why I'm saying to you, when someone's bringing you a message and they're trying to influence you to go in one direction or another, understand what their objective is, understand their history as it relates to you and the current condition of your family, your people, and the community. Because it all matters. And some may say it doesn't matter, but it does. It all matters. And then the next thing I would suggest, as it relates to how we handle propaganda, is to question. Ask questions. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. Whether it's a question that's dealing with your child's education, your child's health care, your health care, the political party or the candidates that folks want you to vote for and support. Question it all. If the person standing in front of you is offended, annoyed, or irritated because you're questioning them, then question why they're annoyed at being questioned. If there is no harm, then that person should be opened to questions, and critical questions, and intensive questions. Now, I know some people just are, somewhat maybe immature or unprepared for questions, and they should just say, I wasn't prepared for these questions today. But for someone to become offended, I've seen even political candidates become highly agitated at the constituents who are questioning them. Well, sir or ma'am, you're not ready yet. You're not ready yet to serve the people if you cannot manage the questions that are, coming before you. So we have to question. I've been in classrooms. I've been in houses of worship where questions were discouraged. And that to me is very, very questionable. And I knew that if I don't have the opportunity to ask questions, then that's not really the right place for me. And if someone is coming before you and does not like being questioned, doesn't accept the questions that you're asking, then maybe that's not the person that should be standing in front of you. Next, in handling propaganda, I would say it's very, very helpful, very, very beneficial to have a strong base of reference and to have a strong foundation. So, and it depends on the person's background and their perspective and where they're coming from. Someone that has a scientific background, then that's probably the foundation that they're standing on when they are doing their study, when they are doing their investigation. Some people may have a scriptural, background. Some people might have a background in community-based organization, in politics. But it helps when you have a very, very strong foundation so that you can compare and filter what it is that you're getting through the strength of your foundation. And, if your foundation is in science, for example, and those around you don't like you kind of investigating something new, then question that. If your foundation is, maybe you've grown up in church, and that's the strength of your foundation comes from a religious background, and your pastor or, those around you may feel uncomfortable that you're investigating new ideas or new thoughts, then question that. Question why folks are offended at you seeking additional information. Because if what you have is strong, then you shouldn't be wavered from it. And it's quite possible that what you're hearing can inform the work that you're doing now. Or you may hear it and it may not make sense from the base of your foundation, and you just discard it. But you are free to question, and I think it's beneficial to use the base of your foundation when you're doing your investigation. And then my fourth and final tip is to take your time. To take your time. Now, I earlier when I talked about propaganda, I used marketing and advertising, sales as an example. And we are constantly being bombarded with propaganda. There's a new iPhone every year. There's a new Galaxy phone every year. Audi has a new model every year. Ford has a new truck that's coming out every year, right? Well, look, just because someone is marketing to us, advertising to capture our attention and ultimately our dollars. By changing our behavior, we should not be hasty in making a financial commitment because of an advertisement. We should not be hasty in making a medical decision because of an advertisement or propaganda. We shouldn't be hasty in rushing out because of, the strong emotion. And I'll tell you, some of these marketing ads, they really, really pull on your emotions. You listen to and watch a lot of these commercials, and these people are such social scientists who create these ads to tug on our emotions, and they create an emotional response that ultimately has a behavior that follows it. And it's just so clever, and I just marvel at the ingenuity of this. But I also know that people use these same tactics when they're trying to move populations of people to support one idea or another. And so I caution you to take your time to reach the conclusion. Right now, my son is going to be entering into his freshman year of college. And, we had to really think through the best educational opportunity for him. And we couldn't do it just because we were excited, or he couldn't make a decision just because he was excited. We had to think through and be thoughtful and not make a hasty decision. And so this applies to everything. Take your time in reaching your conclusion, and never make a hasty decision under the influence of excitement, whether that's the excitement of fear, right? Or maybe that's the excitement of happiness. Take your time to make a sober decision. And so to make a sober decision, you have to weigh your options very, very carefully, even if it takes you stepping back to put some space between you and the influence, and really kind of weigh those options. And, in this day and time, we cannot be intellectually lazy. Those of us who are intellectually lazy or physically lazy, we are vulnerable to those who are not. And we just can't let other people think for us in this day. We have to ask the critical questions. We must study the speaker or the messenger who's bringing us the message. We should have a strong base for reference and a strong foundation. And then again, take your time when you make a decision to make sure it's the right decision for you. There's a lot of propaganda out there, folks, and folks are trying to sway us to go in one direction or another. And so you have to think critically in determining what is the right way for you, what is the right thing for your family. And we cannot be rushed into such important decisions. That is all for this episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. What are your thoughts about this? You can email me at nora@noraspeaks.com. That's nora@noraspeaks.com. It is always a pleasure to be with you each and every week. Until next time, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, norahmuhammad.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@noraspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nora Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nora Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.